Daniel Park had built his empire on control. Every corner of the Palisade Regency reflected that the flawless symmetry of marble tiles, the crisp scent of imported cologne lingering in the air, the hush that fell whenever his footsteps echoed across the lobby. But that morning, control was slipping through his fingers. He could feel it in the way eyes followed him. Not with obedience, but with judgment. The staff who used to scatter now stood frozen, watching. Guess whispered. Phones recorded. And in the center of it all stood Tiana Grant, the woman he had fired 15 minutes ago, calm and unshaken, undoing a billion-dollar reputation with nothing more than truth. Upstairs in his office, Daniel's world was already collapsing in real time. The video had spread like fire through dry grass. Within an hour, every local outlet had picked it up. The headline read, "Billionaire Daniel Park publicly humiliates hotel maid she turns out to be his business partner." His PR head, Lisa Reynolds, tried to keep her composure as she handed him updates. "Sir, we're trending across 3 platforms. The footage has hit 500,000 views in 40 minutes. Legal's panicking. The board is calling for an emergency meeting." Daniel gripped the edge of his desk, eyes burning. "It's exaggerated. They don't understand what happened." Lisa hesitated. "They understand exactly what they saw." He turned sharply, glare cutting into her. "You're supposed to control narratives. Do your job." She didn't flinch this time. "I am doing my job. The narrative is already written. The only thing left to control is your response." Her words hit him harder than she meant them to. For a second, Daniel saw himself from the outside, an image of power that had finally cracked under its own reflection. He straightened, jaw tight. "Get me my attorney. And find that journalist. The one filming." But by then, Andre Field's post had already gone global. His caption, "Watch what happens when a billionaire calls the wrong woman lazy," had drawn millions of views. Comment sections were filled with disbelief, admiration, outrage. The hashtags multiplied. "Respect your workers." Tiana Grant, Taru Palisade incident downstairs. The staff had gathered in quiet awe around Tiana. The same employees who once whispered warnings now looked at her differently, like a leader they never knew they had. Debbie Lawson, still trembling, asked, "Are you sure you're safe, Tiana?" "He's powerful." Tiana smiled faintly. "So am I. He just didn't know it." Her phone buzzed again, messages from her company's lawyers confirming receipt of media inquiries. She scrolled briefly, then locked the screen. "We won't fight him," she said. "We'll just tell the truth and let people see what kind of empire he's running." Upstairs, Daniel's mother, Yoonji Park, was already on the phone again. Her voice was low and clipped. "You embarrassed us. You embarrassed your father's legacy. Apologize now before the investors pull out." "Mother, do it," she snapped. "You think pride will save you? Humility will." Daniel slammed the phone down but said nothing. For the first time, her words echoed instead of fading. Lisa stood at the door, arms crossed. "You know what you need to do," she said. He looked up, his eyes dark with defiance. "You want me to kneel to a maid?" "I want you to act like a man who finally realizes she wasn't one," Lisa said. "Because the world already sees her as more than that." Her tone was steady, not mocking, and that somehow made it worse. He turned away, staring out the window, the city skyline cold and unforgiving. Down in the lobby, hotel guests watched news alerts roll across their phones as Tiana walked toward the exit, security badge in hand. The same marble that had once felt like her boundary now sounded like her victory drum with every step she took. The camera flashes followed her, but she didn't speak, didn't pose. She simply paused at the front desk, where Richard Hale stood red-faced, unsure what to say. "You're not going to lose your job for this," she said quietly. Richard swallowed. He's never been challenged before. "I didn't know what to do." "You'll figure it out," she replied. "That's what accountability looks like." And then she was gone, walking through the revolving doors into the Atlanta morning, into a world suddenly ready to listen. Within hours, her company's official statement went live. Pureline Facility Solutions has suspended all operations with Palisade Regency and its affiliates pending an internal ethics review. "We remain committed to safe, respectful, and lawful workplaces for all staff and contractors." The statement was short, professional, devastating. Sponsors withdrew advertising. Hotel bookings dipped overnight. By noon, Daniel's boardroom was a battlefield. "You turned our brand into a scandal," one executive shouted. "She's not just an employee," another said. "She's a partner in contract law. She can sue us for breach and she'll win." Daniel sat silent, jaw clenched. He had built these men's loyalty on fear, and now that fear had turned on him. "We will fix this," he said finally, his voice low but hard. "How?" asked one board member. "By yelling at another maid?" Laughter, bitter and sharp, rippled around the table. Daniel's hands tightened into fists. "Get out," he said. But even as they left, he could feel control slipping further. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the city skyline, Tiana sat in her apartment surrounded by boxes of legal paperwork. Her grandmother's framed photo rested beside her laptop. Miss Loretta's eyes, warm and wise, seemed to watch over her. Tiana exhaled. "You said to never let anyone treat me like dirt," she whispered. "I didn't, Grandma. Not today." Her phone vibrated again, a message from an unknown number. From Daniel Park, "We need to talk. Now." She stared at it for a long time before replying, "Tomorrow. 9 a.m. boardroom, bring respect this time. At 9 a.m. sharp?" The elevator opened and Daniel walked in, not with the arrogance that once preceded him, but with something unfamiliar, humility. The cameras were waiting again. So was the staff. He looked at Tiana across the table and said the one sentence no one expected to hear. "You were right." Gasps whispered through the room. He continued, voice quieter now. "This company lost its soul. I lost mine. If you're willing to help rebuild it, I'm ready to start over." Tiana held his gaze. "It's not about starting over, Mr. Park. It's about doing better from here on." For the first time since his empire began, Daniel nodded not as a command but as an acknowledgement. And for the first time in her career, Tiana didn't need anyone's permission to lead, because that morning, the man who once thought he owned everything finally realized what couldn't be bought: dignity. It had always belonged to her. Daniel Park hadn't slept. The morning after the lobby incident, he sat alone in his penthouse office, surrounded by silence that money couldn't fix. The city stretched beyond the glass walls, cold, indifferent, and awake. His phone vibrated endlessly. News alerts, investor calls, statements from the board. Every headline carried his name beside hers. "Billionaire humiliates maid who owns his hotel contract." He rubbed his temples and muttered, "How did this happen in less than 12 hours? His assistant, Michael Hahn, hovered nearby, voice uncertain. "Sir, the videos hit 2 million views overnight." Pureline's official page confirmed Ms. Grant's ownership. They even posted copies of the contracts, signed, dated, airtight. "The board wants a damage report and a plan of action by noon." Before Daniel could respond, the elevator chimed. His mother, Yoonji Park, swept in without knocking, dressed immaculately, her calm cutting deeper than any anger. She looked at him for a long moment before speaking. "Do you understand what you've done?" He leaned back, exhausted. "It was a misunderstanding." "No," she said, voice sharp enough to slice glass. "It was arrogance. You humiliated a woman who represents the very thing this family once was. Your father built this company with his hands washing linens, scrubbing hotel floors in Busan. The same kind of work that woman does." Daniel swallowed hard. "You're taking her side?" "I'm taking the side of truth," Yoonji said coldly. "And truth is not negotiable. You've shamed our name. Fix it publicly. Apologize? To a maid?" Her gaze hardened. "To a businesswoman who owns a piece of your empire. The world already sees her as your equal, now act like you see it too." For once, Daniel had no comeback. Across town, Tiana Grant sat in a small midtown cafe across from her lawyer. The early light filtered through the blinds, tracing patterns on the table. She looked calm, even serene, but her mind was racing. The lawyer slid a folder across the table. "You're trending on every major platform. Interview requests, endorsements, legal inquiries. Everyone wants your statement." Tiana shook her head. "No interviews. The footage says everything. I don't need sympathy, I need accountability." At the next table, Andre Fields, the journalist who'd filmed the video, lifted his laptop. "You've already got it," he said. "People are writing think pieces about class, race, and power dynamics in corporate America. You've become a symbol overnight." Tiana frowned slightly. "Symbols don't pay rent, Andre, and they don't change systems, people do." Andre smiled knowingly. "Then change it. Because from what I saw yesterday, you're the only one in that building who's not afraid to." She didn't answer, but the spark in her eyes said enough. At that very hour, chaos brewed inside the Palisade Regency's top-floor conference room. The board had gathered in grim silence. Lisa Reynolds, the PR director, projected a graph of overnight analytics. If we don't issue a statement within 24 hours, Pureline can legally suspend services across all 5 hotel branches, she said. One executive grumbled, "Can we just buy them out?" "This can't be allowed to continue." Lisa shook her head. Clause 7B prevents forced termination unless initiated by Ms. Grant. That clause was designed to protect small vendors from corporate abuse. Ironically, it's working perfectly. The room went still. Then Daniel walked in. He looked immaculate, but everyone could see the tension behind his eyes. "We're not groveling to social media," he said. "We'll handle this privately." "Daniel," Lisa said carefully, "this isn't a negotiation. She holds every legal and moral card. You can't intimidate her," he smirked. "Everyone breaks when pressure's applied, right?" Lisa stared at him for a long moment. "That line," she said quietly, "is exactly why you're here." By late afternoon, Daniel drove himself downtown. No entourage, no press, just him and the weight of 1,000 unread notifications. When he stepped into Pureline's headquarters, a renovated warehouse with polished concrete floors, employees froze mid-conversation. Even here, his reputation walked in first. The receptionist straightened nervously. "Mr. Park, Ms. Grant is expecting you." He entered the conference room, and there she was, composed, confident, untouchable. The woman he'd called lazy now looked every inch his equal. "I didn't come here for a show," Daniel began. "Neither did I when you shouted at me," she replied. His jaw flexed. "You made your point. The internet's having its fun. Let's end this quietly." "Quietly?" Tiana's voice stayed calm. "You humiliated me in front of strangers. You don't get to clean that up in private." Daniel stiffened. "What do you want?" "I want reform," she said. "Every manager, every staff member trained to treat human beings like human beings. You'll call it the dignity policy and you'll announce it publicly. You're giving me orders now? I'm giving you a chance to fix what you broke," she said evenly. "You built this place on fear. I'm offering you a foundation of respect instead." For once, Daniel had no retort. His usual power, the stare, the tone, the control meant nothing here. "Why didn't you tell anyone you owned Pureline?" he asked finally. "Because I wanted to see how people like you treated people like me," she said. "And now I know." A long silence settled between them. The hum of the air conditioner was the only sound. Daniel exhaled slowly. "Fine, draft your policy. I'll sign it." "No," she said, sliding a folder across the table. "You'll announce it tomorrow, yourself." He frowned. "And if I don't?" She opened the folder and revealed a printed email. "Then this goes public, your manager's internal memo suggesting staff profile guests by appearance. Your signature's on it." His face drained. "Where did you get that?" "From your employees," she said. "They've seen what leadership without conscience looks like. They're ready for something better." His anger flared, then ebbed just as quickly. What replaced it wasn't fear, it was shame. "You're not what I expected." Tiana gave a faint smile. "Neither were you. But people can change, if they choose to." He nodded once, defeated but aware. "I'll do it. The announcement goes live tomorrow." "And mean it," she said softly. "Not for me, for everyone you've ever made feel small." He met her eyes. "Understood." As he turned to leave, Michael Hahn was waiting by the door. "Well?" he asked quietly. Daniel straightened his suit, his voice lower now. "Prepare the press conference. And tell legal to start rewriting our conduct policies. Every single one," Michael blinked. "You're serious?" For once, Daniel said yes. That night, Atlanta buzzed. TV pundits debated. Newspapers reprinted Tiana's face beside headlines calling her the woman who humbled a billionaire. She didn't watch. Instead, she sat by her grandmother's old radio, the same one that had played gospel hymns on long work nights. The apartment was quiet except for the gentle static of the dial. She poured tea, folded her hands, and thought of Miss Loretta's words. "Clean the floor till it shines, but never let anyone step on your soul." She smiled softly. Tomorrow, she knew, wouldn't just be about revenge or redemption, it would be about reflection, the kind that made an empire look at itself and see for once what it had tried so long to ignore. And somewhere across the city, in a penthouse filled with silence, Daniel Park rehearsed his apology. Each word tasted heavy, each pause heavier. He knew the cameras would capture his face. The world would measure his sincerity. and no amount of wealth could soften the verdict that mattered most, whether he'd finally learned the one thing money could never buy: respect. Morning broke heavy over Atlanta, the air thick with tension. Outside the Palisade Regency, cameras crowded the glass doors. Inside, Daniel Park, once untouchable, stood before a podium. No branding, no music, just him and the world waiting for contrition. "Yesterday," he began, voice low but clear, "an incident occurred that revealed more about me and this company than I'd like to admit. Ms. Tiana Grant was treated unfairly by me personally. It was wrong, and I intend to make it right." He paused, letting the silence work. "I built my career on control and standards. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that people aren't standards, they're the foundation of everything." Then came the shocker. Effective immediately, Ms. Grant will serve as independent ethics and operations advisor across all Palisade branches. Gasps rippled. His mother, Yoonji Park, watched from the back, stern but proud. Upstairs, Tiana listened quietly. For once, Daniel's words sounded honest. When the press conference ended, he met her gaze across the atrium. A simple nod passed between them, acknowledgement, not apology. By week's end, Project Open Doors launched. Pureline and Palisade jointly rolled out new ethics codes and anonymous reporting systems. Staff, once afraid to speak, finally had a voice. Some executives grumbled. Investors fretted that Daniel had gone soft. But the world saw something else, a company trying to change. Andre Fields met Tiana in a park for an interview. "They're calling you the woman who humbled a billionaire," he said. Tiana smiled faintly. "I didn't want to humble anyone. I wanted dignity. Do you trust him now?" "Not yet," she said. "But I believe in progress. Trust comes after consistency." Her quote, "Accountability is like cleaning. You don't stop when it's shiny," once went viral by nightfall. Inside the boardroom, Daniel faced wary investors. "Our approval's up 12%, Lisa Reynolds reported. "But the market doesn't like surprises." Daniel replied evenly, "Then the market will adjust." When his phone buzzed, Tiana Grant. "Urgent compliance review," he stood. Predictables canceled. In the meeting room, Tiana laid out reports. 3 managers in Miami are still profiling guests. "We can't preach reform and ignore this." Daniel frowned. "I'll handle it." "No," she said. "We handle it," he nodded. The man who once barked orders now listened. Together, they dismantled bad policies, retrained leadership, and built something better. The media dubbed it the Palisade Effect, a model for corporate redemption. Weeks later, at the reopening gala, Daniel approached her amid the glow of chandeliers. "You once said I didn't know you." "I'm learning." "Good," she said. "Just don't forget it next quarter." He chuckled softly. "You enjoy humbling me." "I enjoy honesty," she said. "It's rarer than diamonds here." His tone turned reflective. "My father died young. I thought control could stop things from breaking, but control turned to cruelty." "You can't rewrite yesterday," Tiana replied. "You can clean up the mess." Later, long after the guests had gone, Daniel stood alone in the silent lobby, the same marble floor where pride had once drowned him. Tiana's voice broke the quiet. "And now, what's leadership mean to you?" He turned. "Being worth following," she smiled. "That's progress." They shook hands, equals now. As she left, the polished floor reflected not power but humility. For the first time, Daniel Park felt lighter. His empire finally had a soul. And the woman who taught him respect walked into the night, leaving behind proof that dignity, once defended, can rebuild an entire world. 2 months later, Atlanta had moved on, or so it seemed. The frenzy around the Palisade incident had faded from headlines, but inside the company, its aftershocks still shaped every decision. Change had begun, but it came with resistance. Tiana Grant's mornings now started before sunrise. No more mops or cleaning carts, just flight schedules, policy audits, and video calls with regional managers, still learning to respect the woman they once overlooked. Progress wasn't easy, but she didn't expect it to be. At headquarters, Daniel Park's once imposing office had lost its polish. Folders labeled training reforms and workplace culture buried his sleek desk. The billionaire who once measured success in marble now wrestled with accountability in spreadsheets. When Tiana walked in that morning, he was pacing. "The Chicago branch," he said. "Complaints again, tone, discrimination, selective service." "Then we handle it," she said. "Publicly?" "No, quietly. Public humiliation doesn't change culture." He smirked. "Quoting me now?" No, she said with a faint smile. Improving your lines. Later that day, they flew to Chicago. The branch, all brass chandeliers and old arrogance, greeted them with polished smiles. The regional director, Richard Blake, barely acknowledged Tiana. Daniel caught it immediately. You haven't met Ms. Grant, he said evenly. She's auditing your property. During inspection, Tiana uncovered falsified cleaning reports and a Latina housekeeper's ignored harassment complaint. When she told Daniel, his expression hardened. They learned nothing, he said. They learned what they could get away with, she replied. That night, Daniel called every employee into the ballroom. Perfection without empathy, he said, is rot dressed in marble. We won't repeat our past. Then he handed the floor to Tiana. She hesitated, then spoke like she was dusting off old pride. You all saw what happened in Atlanta. Respect is the only luxury that never goes out of style. The applause that followed wasn't loud, but it was genuine. Within weeks, complaints dropped 40%. Staff turnover fell. Guest reviews spoke of warmth instead of wealth. Project Open Doors expanded across the Park Group, voted in unanimously by the board with Tiana at the center. But not everyone celebrated. Some whispered that Daniel had gone soft. Others claimed Tiana was just for optics. She ignored it. Real change, she told a reporter, isn't comfortable and it's never quiet. One evening, Daniel stopped her outside a board meeting. Ever think about what's next? You mean after I finish fixing your empire? She teased. He smiled. Something like that. Maybe I'll start my own hotels, she said. Affordable, fair, clean run by people who care. He studied her. You'd make a dangerous competitor. I'd make a fair one. Then I'll invest, he said. Weeks later, they stood together in the Palisade lobby, reborn and bustling. Guests smiled, staff laughed, and near the entrance hung a bronze plaque that read, This space belongs to everyone, in honor of Tiana Grant, whose courage restored our humanity. Tiana blinked. You didn't have to. I did, Daniel said. You taught me something worth remembering. She touched the inscription softly. It's not about me. I know, he said. It's about everyone who realized they could stand up too. As dusk settled, she packed her bag for another audit trip. Keep it clean, Mr. Park. Yes, ma'am, he said, smiling. She stepped into the glowing city evening, her silhouette fading into the hum of Atlanta. Behind her, Daniel stood at the door not as a billionaire towering above, but as a man finally standing eye to eye. Because heroes don't always wear suits. Sometimes they wear uniforms, stand their ground, and polish the world until it sees itself clearly again. Respect isn't a luxury, it's the foundation beneath every shining floor. 3 more months passed, and what began as a scandal had quietly become a case study. Business schools dissected it. Leadership coaches quoted it. The press called it the Palisade turnaround. But inside the company, it wasn't theory, it was work. Real messy daily work. Tiana Grant didn't have a corner office. She didn't want one. Her desk was planted in the open plan floor, surrounded by junior staff and interns. Every morning, she started with the same ritual black coffee, a 10-minute team huddle, and a reminder she'd written on a sticky note taped to her screen. Power means nothing without patience. Her phone buzzed constantly. Contractors from Houston, compliance reports from Denver, policy drafts from New York. But one message caught her attention, a personal one from Daniel Park. Need to see you. Board's trying to reverse reforms. Within an hour, she was in his office. Daniel stood by the window, tie loosened, tension written across his face. They're saying Project Open Doors is costing too much, he said. They want to scale it back. Tiana didn't flinch. That's not cost. That's investment. I told them that, Daniel said, frustration edging his voice. But they're quoting numbers, returns, optics. They think it's just image cleanup. Tiana crossed her arms. Then show them what happens when you stop cleaning. He turned toward her. Meaning? Invite them here, she said. Show them the lobby you rebuilt. Show them the people. Let them talk to the staff who stayed because of this program. You want to keep reform alive? Make them feel it, Daniel nodded slowly. A tour. Run by you. I'll do it, she said. But on one condition, he smirked. There's always one. You stay silent, she said. They'll listen to me if you don't protect me. He smiled faintly. Fair. 2 days later, the board arrived, 7 people in tailored suits, all skeptical smiles and polished shoes. Tiana greeted them in the lobby. Welcome to the Palisade Regency, she said warmly. Let me show you what progress looks like. She walked them through the marble atrium, past the bronze plaque bearing her name. Guests checked in smoothly. Employees smiled real smiles, not rehearsed. Our complaint response time dropped from 48 hours to 6, she explained. Employee turnover is down 50%. Guest satisfaction is at an all-time high. One board member, a woman named Cynthia Doyle, crossed her arms. And how much did that cost? Tiana met her gaze. Less than one lawsuit and one viral video. Another, an older man, muttered. Soft values don't pay dividends. Tiana gestured to the nearby barista counter, now run by a local startup employing single mothers. Tell them that when they see their paychecks on time every week. Or ask our cleaning staff who finally get healthcare benefits. The group went silent. Then she guided them to the staff lounge, a renovated space once used as a storage closet. Now it was bright, comfortable, filled with laughter. A housekeeper waved at her. Morning, Miss Grant. Morning, Rosa, Tiana said with a smile. Cynthia looked around. You know their names? I know their stories, Tiana replied. That's why they stay. Daniel followed behind quietly, watching every word. This was her battlefield now, and she owned it without raising her voice. When the tour ended, the board gathered near the front desk. You've made your point, Cynthia admitted. We'll keep Project Open Doors for now. Tiana nodded once. That's all I needed. As they left, Daniel approached her. You didn't just win them over, you reminded them why we started this. She gave a small smile. Then don't forget it next quarter. Weeks later, an email arrived from Yoonji Park. The subject line read, Dinner invitation. Tiana hesitated before accepting. That evening, she found herself at the Park family estate, an elegant mix of Korean tradition and Southern architecture. The dining table stretched across the room, laid with precision. Hunji entered wearing a deep navy hanbok, her posture regal but her expression soft. I wanted to see you, Yoonji said. Without cameras, without business. Tiana nodded politely. I appreciate that, they sat. Yoonji poured tea. You remind me of my mother, she said. Strong, proud, but careful. You see people. That's rare, Tiana smiled faintly. I just try to do what's right. That's why my son needed you, Yoonji said. Not to change him, but to show him what power looks like when it bends instead of breaks. Tiana looked down at her cup. He's learning, Yoonji chuckled softly. He's always learning the hard way. The mood lightened. They spoke for hours about family, work, legacy. When Tiana left, Yoonji walked her to the door. You've given my son something no one else could, she said. Tiana raised an eyebrow. What's that? A conscience. A few nights later, Daniel and Tiana met again at the hotel after hours. The lobby was quiet, the city lights spilling through the glass. I heard you had dinner with my mother, Daniel said. She's wiser than you, Tiana teased. I know, he said, smiling. Then more seriously, she told me to stop chasing control and start building trust. Tiana looked at him. And did you listen? I'm trying, he said. But it's strange. For the first time, I feel like I don't have to win. I just have to do better. That's called growth, she said. He nodded, eyes thoughtful. You ever think about why you didn't walk away that day? You could have sued me, destroyed me. She paused. Because people like me have been walking away for too long. Someone had to stay and clean up the mess. They stood in silence for a while, the city hum filling the space between them. Finally, Daniel said, Tiana, whatever happens next, thank you. She smiled. Just keep it clean, Mr. Park. He chuckled quietly. Yes, ma'am. By spring, the Palisade Regency wasn't just a hotel. It was a symbol. Industry leaders visited to study its transformation. Training programs were adopted nationwide. And for the first time, Tiana's company, Pureline, expanded beyond hospitality into schools, airports, and government offices. The woman who once scrubbed marble floors now signed national contracts from a boardroom she'd built with her own name on the wall. But she never forgot where it started with one towel, one insult, and one choice not to back down. Because sometimes the smallest act of dignity can shake the tallest empire. And in Atlanta, that empire now stood cleaner than ever. The summer heat had settled thick over Atlanta. But inside the Palisades glass tower, the air felt cool and sharp with ambition. The reforms were working, but success had made new enemies. Emails began leaking again. Anonymous posts online claimed the reforms were performative. An op-ed in a business journal called Tiana, the MAID turned Messiah, questioning whether she'd been hired for justice or optics. For a day she ignored it, but when the comments turned personal, questioning her education, her capability, she shut her laptop and went straight to Daniel's office. He looked up from his desk, already aware. "I saw it. I don't care about gossip," she said, "but these attacks came from inside your company. Someone's feeding them stories." Daniel exhaled. "I'll trace it." "You shouldn't have to," she replied. "You built a culture where fear thrived. This is the residue," he nodded slowly. "Then let's clean it." Within 24 hours, the internal security team uncovered the source, a senior vice president who'd felt threatened by her authority. Daniel didn't delay. He fired him publicly during a staff meeting, citing ethical sabotage. The message was clear. The era of whispering power was over. Afterward, Daniel caught up with her in the corridor. "I've spent years building walls around this company," he said quietly. "You keep knocking them down." She smiled faintly. "That's what you hired me for." He laughed. But there was admiration in it now. Weeks later, the company prepared for its first Open Horizons conference, an industry event, showcasing the new model of inclusive hospitality. Journalists from across the country were attending. Daniel insisted Tiana give the keynote. She resisted at first. "I'm not a speaker. I'm a worker." "That's exactly why they need to hear you," he said. On the morning of the conference, the ballroom gleamed with light. Rows of executives, hotel owners, and staff filled the seats. Cameras flashed. When Tiana stepped onto the stage, she didn't read from notes. She just looked out at the crowd and spoke. 300 days ago, she began, I was told I didn't belong in a place I helped keep standing. That moment was loud, but what came after was louder because silence broke. She told them about reform not as policy but as choice, about dignity as an everyday habit, about how a towel on a cart had become a mirror, held up to an entire industry. The room was silent. Even Daniel looked moved. She ended simply, "If you run a company, ask yourself one question: would the people cleaning your floors defend you if you weren't in the room? If the answer's no, start over." The applause that followed wasn't polite, it was thunderous. By the end of that summer, Palisade Group had tripled its profits, but what people talked about wasn't money. It was culture. News anchors called it the Tiana effect. Universities invited her to lecture. Documentaries followed, but she stayed grounded. She still visited each hotel unannounced, inspecting lobbies, chatting with janitors, listening. She never let success soften her sense of fairness. One afternoon, while walking through the newly reopened New Orleans branch, she got a call from Daniel. "You're on the front page again," he said. "Good or bad?" "Both," he admitted. "A profile in Forbes." "They're calling you the conscience of corporate America," she chuckled. "That's too heavy for one person. Tell them conscience should be contagious." That fall, Daniel invited her to dinner, nothing formal. Just two people catching up after a year that had rewritten both their lives. They sat on the rooftop terrace of the hotel, the city glittering below. "You ever think about how strange it is?" he said. "That one argument in a lobby could change everything." Tiana smiled. "Change starts small. People just don't notice until it's loud." He raised his glass. "To loud changes," she clinked hers gently. "And to clean slates." They laughed, the sound soft against the city hum. But success carried one final test. 2 weeks later, Daniel received an offer from an international conglomerate to buy out the Palisade Group for nearly $1 billion. The catch? They wanted to dissolve Project Open Doors. Too expensive, too American, they said. When he told Tiana, she stared at him, searching his face. "So it's money or integrity?" he sighed. "It's never that simple." "It's exactly that simple," she said. "You can sell the buildings, but if you sell the values, you're right back where you started." Daniel looked at her, the weight of choice heavy on his shoulders. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he reached into his drawer, pulled out the contract, and tore it in half. Tiana blinked. "That easy?" he smiled. The old me would have signed without reading. The new me listens before he decides. For the first time since that infamous morning months ago, she allowed herself to feel something close to pride. "Then you finally learned," she said. "I had a good teacher," he replied. Winter arrived early. Snow dusted the Palisade's glass awnings. The lobby glowed warm with holiday lights. Guests moved easily. Staff chatted freely. and the place felt alive in a way marble alone could never achieve. Tiana stood in the corner, watching. A young maid approached shyly. "Ms. Grant, can I ask something?" "Of course. Didn't it scare you?" "Standing up to him like that?" Tiana smiled. "It did. But fear's like dirt, it builds up if you never face it. Sometimes you just have to start scrubbing." The girl laughed softly. "I want to be like you someday." "Don't," Tiana said kindly. "Be better. That's the point." Across the lobby, Daniel watched the exchange. He didn't interrupt. He just smiled, the kind of smile that came from seeing something rebuilt right. That night, after the last guests had checked in, Daniel locked his office and stepped into the quiet hall. Tiana was still there, reviewing reports. "You never rest," he said. "Clean doesn't wait," she replied. He laughed. "You know, my mother says I'm calmer now. She blames you." "I'll take the credit," she said. He looked at her for a moment. "We started as enemies." "No," she corrected. "We started as proof that people can learn." He nodded. "And we ended as what?" Tiana closed her folder, met his eyes, and said softly, "As equals." They shook hands one last time under the soft lobby lights, the same place where power once screamed, and dignity had finally answered back. Outside, Atlanta slept beneath a thin veil of snow. Inside, the palisade stood brighter than ever, a monument not to wealth but to redemption. Because in the end, it wasn't a towel, a contract, or a scandal that changed everything. It was one woman who refused to bow, one man who learned to listen, and a story that proved respect can rebuild empires. Autumn came softly to Atlanta. The air cooler, the skyline clearer, the Palisade Regency gleaming under streaks of late evening light. The hotel was thriving again, but inside its polished calm, a new chapter was quietly unfolding. Daniel Park was preparing to step down as CEO. After a year of reform, he had realized something he never expected. The company no longer needed him at the center. It needed continuity, and that meant handing the reins to someone who understood the culture better than any boardroom veteran ever could. But convincing the board was another story. They wanted a proven executive. They proposed names, all familiar, all predictable. Daniel listened, silent, then said, "You're overlooking the one person who built this transformation." Cynthia Doyle frowned. "You mean Ms. Grant? She's brilliant, but she's not what?" Daniel interrupted softly. "Not born into this industry. Not wearing the right suit?" The room fell silent. "She's already been leading," he continued. "She's just never had the title." When the vote came, the motion stalled half for half against. The decision was postponed. That night, Daniel called Tiana to the rooftop terrace again. The skyline glowed orange. "They're hesitant," he said. "I'm not surprised," she replied. "People like me don't fit into the picture they paint of leadership." "Then we'll repaint it," Daniel said. She looked at him, genuinely touched. "You'd give up your seat for me?" He shook his head. "I'm not giving it up. I'm passing it forward." "There's a difference," she smiled quietly. "You've changed. I had a reason to." They stood there for a long moment, both knowing the conversation meant more than succession. It was about legacy, his and hers. The next week, Daniel made it official. He called a full company assembly in the grand ballroom. Staff from every department crowded in, housekeepers, concierges, chefs, even the security guard who once escorted Tiana to the door. Daniel stepped up to the microphone. "When this company was built," he began, "we measured success in marble floors and 5-star ratings. Then one day someone reminded me that true luxury isn't gold, it's fairness." He turned toward Tiana. "She changed us. She changed me. And today, she becomes the first chief integrity officer in Palisade's history, the conscience of this brand." Gasps rippled through the room. Cameras clicked. Tiana froze for a moment, then stepped forward, applause rising around her. Daniel leaned toward her and whispered, "Phase 1. She smiled. "Phase 2's on you." He turned back to the crowd. "And effective next quarter, I'll be transitioning from CEO to chairman. This company will now be co-led by structure, not by ego." The applause turned into a roar. Later, in the quiet after the crowd dispersed, Tiana stood alone in the ballroom, staring up at the chandeliers. A year ago, she'd been scrubbing floors under those same lights. Now she was signing directives beneath them. Debbie Lawson, her former supervisor, walked in carrying a bouquet. "It's strange, isn't it?" Debbie said. "Seeing you up there?" It's stranger knowing how much had to break before we got here, Tiana replied. Debbie smiled softly. You fixed more than this hotel, Tiana. You fixed the people in it. Tiana shook her head. No, they fixed themselves once they were seen. The months that followed tested her new title. She discovered what leadership really meant, not speeches, but choices. She fired managers who refused reform, rehired employees once unfairly dismissed, and built mentorship programs for young women entering the industry. Every policy came from lived experience. She also faced pressure. Investors questioned her methods. Headlines doubted her longevity. But she stayed steady. When Daniel felt tempted to defend her publicly, she stopped him. Don't fight my battles, she said. Stand beside me while I win them. And she did. By year's end, Palisade Hospitality was named one of Fortune's most ethical companies. Revenues hit record highs. Guest loyalty doubled. More than numbers, it was reputation rebuilt by truth, not spin. One night, as the first anniversary of the incident approached, the staff gathered for a private commemoration. No press, no grand speeches, just gratitude. Elena Ruiz, now a senior regional director, raised a toast. To Ms. Grant, who turned a moment of humiliation into a movement of hope. Tiana laughed softly. To everyone who stopped pretending not to see. Even Daniel joined in, smiling like a man who had finally found peace. After the applause faded, he stepped aside with her. You know what I realized? He said. The day I fired you, I thought I was teaching you a lesson. Turns out you were teaching me mine, she chuckled. Took you long enough. I'm still learning, he said. Good, she replied. That's what keeps you human. Weeks later, an envelope arrived at Tiana's desk. Inside was a simple note written in Daniel's neat handwriting. You built something that will outlast both of us. Thank you for cleaning more than floors. Thank you for cleaning hearts. Below it was a small key to the penthouse suite she had once been barred from. On the back of the keychain was a tag engraved with 4 words, You belong here now. Tiana held it in her palm for a long time. Then she placed it in her drawer, not as a trophy but as a reminder, because the fight was never about entry, it was about equality. And equality, she knew, had to be maintained every single day, like polish on marble. Outside, winter light flooded the lobby. Guests checked in, staff greeted them with warmth, and the plaque near the entrance caught the morning sun. This space belongs to everyone. Tiana passed by it quietly, heading toward a meeting where new employees were waiting. She looked at the reflection of her own face in the plaque, not prideful, just grounded. A year ago, the world learned her name. Today, it learned her purpose. And as she opened the conference room door, she said the words that had guided her from the start. Clean the floor till it shines. But never let anyone step on your soul. 1 year later, the world outside the Palisade moved faster, louder, more chaotic, but inside, it remained a sanctuary of calm, built on the lessons that had once shaken it. Guests still whispered about the maid who changed everything, though few realized she now ran one of the most influential ethics programs in corporate America. Tiana Grant didn't correct them. She didn't need to. Her work spoke louder than any title. The morning sunlight spilled across the glass atrium as she walked in, coffee in hand, greeted by staff who now saw her not as a symbol, but as a leader they trusted. Elena Ruiz met her by the elevator, tablet in hand. Morning, Ms. Grant, media's waiting in the conference hall. They're filming the documentary intro today, something about the Palisade Principle. Tiana laughed lightly. They'll dramatize it more than it was. Elena smiled. With respect, ma'am, it was pretty dramatic. Tiana shook her head. It was necessary. She adjusted her blazer and entered the elevator. The mirrored walls reflected someone she barely recognized, a woman still grounded, still humble, but stronger, surer. The elevator doors opened to a swarm of journalists, cameras, and soft chatter. Daniel Park stood near the front, older but more relaxed, his expression carrying quiet pride. When he saw her, he nodded. Ready to tell the story again? Not my story, she said. Ours. The cameras rolled, lights glared. But this time, Tiana wasn't nervous. A reporter began, Ms. Grant, 1 year after the viral moment that redefined corporate ethics, how has your life changed? Tiana paused, thinking carefully. It's not about my life, she said. It's about how we treat one another when no one's filming. The real change is what you don't see: the policies rewritten, the staff promoted, the silent respect that lives in every hallway now. The room went quiet. The journalist lowered his pen. Daniel stepped forward. When this started, I thought leadership was control. She taught me it's stewardship. The cameras zoomed in. The exchange didn't need more words. After the interview, as the crew packed up, one young journalist lingered. Ms. Grant, if you could say one thing to people working jobs where they're unseen, what would it be? Tiana smiled gently. Be excellent even when no one's watching. That's how you build power that can't be taken away. Later that day, the staff hosted a private lunch to celebrate the anniversary of the company's reform. The air was light, filled with laughter, but there was also reflection memories of the day everything changed. Andre Fields, the journalist whose phone video had started it all, stood to speak. A year ago, I was just grabbing coffee. I hit record on a moment that felt wrong. I didn't know it would change an industry, but I did it because silence is worse than error. Ms. Grant, you didn't just stand up, you made standing up contagious. Applause filled the room. Daniel clapped the loudest. When it faded, Tiana stood. Thank you, Andre. But the truth is, none of this would have lasted if people didn't keep choosing courage every day. Elena, Tom, Debbie, you all turned that one day into a culture. I'm proud of that more than anything. Her voice softened. And to everyone still afraid to speak up, remember, your silence keeps the wrong people comfortable. The room went still again, the kind of silence that meant understanding. That evening, after everyone left, Tiana walked alone through the quiet lobby. The lights were dimmed, the scent of fresh lilies drifting through the air. She stopped near the bronze plaque, still gleaming, still honest. For the first time in months, she let herself feel the weight of it all: the climb, the fight, the victory that came with scars no one saw. She thought of her grandmother, Miss Loretta, whose voice still whispered through her memory. Don't wait for the world to hand you respect, baby. Make them see you deserve it. Miss Loretta, she murmured. We made them see. Upstairs, Daniel was in his office finishing the last of his transition paperwork. Tomorrow he would officially hand over full executive power to Tiana as Chief Executive Officer, a decision the board had finally ratified unanimously after months of watching her leadership in action. He looked at the document, then at her signature already beside his. You really did it, he whispered to himself. You rebuilt the soul of this place. He signed, dated it, and placed the pen down. The deal was sealed. The next morning, the staff gathered in the atrium once again. Daniel stood beside Tiana, the crowd buzzing with anticipation. Today marks a new chapter, he said. For years, this company was known for its luxury. From today on, it'll be known for its integrity. He turned toward her, smiling. Ladies and gentlemen, your new CEO, Ms. Tiana Grant. The applause rose like a wave. Tiana stepped forward, heart steady. She looked at faces that once looked past her and now looked to her. I started here pushing a cleaning cart, she said softly, her voice carrying through the marble hall. I learned that the smallest jobs teach the biggest lessons, that how we treat people matters more than what we sell. This company once lost its reflection. Together we polished it back to truth. The applause grew louder, spilling into cheers. Daniel leaned toward her and said quietly, From MAID to CEO, that's one for the books. Tiana smiled. No, she said, from unseen to unstoppable. That night, the news broke worldwide. Historic. Former hotel maid named CEO of global luxury chain. Messages flooded in, interviews requested. Other companies reached out asking her to consult. But Tiana didn't chase any of it. She stayed focused on the work because fame was fleeting, but fairness needed constant tending. She left the office late, passing the lobby one last time before heading home. Tom, the security guard who had once been ordered to escort her out, nodded respectfully. "Good night, Ms. Grant." She smiled. "Good night, Tom. Thank you for staying." He grinned. Wouldn't want to miss history twice. Outside, the night air felt cool against her skin. She looked up at the Palisade sign glowing against the skyline and thought about everything that had happened, every insult, every doubt, every turning point that led here. It wasn't revenge. It was restoration. She walked away quietly. The city, lights flickering around her, each one a reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary revolutions start in the smallest, most ordinary places. A towel, a word, a moment of courage, and as she disappeared into the Atlanta night, one truth remained carved into the foundation she'd rebuilt. Respect is not a favor, it's a right. And when one woman stands up for it, the whole world stands a little taller. Winter rolled out of Atlanta, and spring took its place with slow confidence. The Palisade Regency was busier than ever, reservations booked months ahead, its name now synonymous not with excess but with empathy. Yet for Tiana Grant, the pressure never eased. Leading a movement was easier than maintaining one. Each morning, she arrived before the staff, walking the marble halls in quiet reflection. Every sound, every greeting reminded her how far they'd come. But progress, she knew, could fade as quickly as polish on a floor left unattended. Her calendar was full: policy meetings, new hire orientations, interviews with global press. Still, she kept a daily routine. She stopped by the housekeeping floor, rolled up her sleeves, and helped fold linens. "If I forget this," she told her team, "then I forget why I'm here." That humility became legend. Meanwhile, Daniel Park had taken a step back, but not away. As chairman, he split his time between mentorship and philanthropy. Yet he struggled to find balance. For decades, his life had been built around control. Now he was learning how to trust others with what he once guarded like a fortress. One afternoon, he walked into Tiana's office unannounced, coffee in hand. "I hear Tokyo wants us to franchise," he said. Tiana smiled. "They asked." I said, "Maybe." He chuckled. "Maybe from you usually means no." "Not yet," she corrected. "If we expand too fast, we lose what made this place different." He studied her. "You still think like a maid." She looked up, amused. "That's a compliment." "It is," he admitted, "because that mindset saved us." 2 weeks later, the company hosted a global summit for diversity and workplace reform. CEOs from other industries attended, hoping to learn from the Palisade model. Tiana delivered the keynote in her usual understated tone. "This began with one mistake," she told them. "One man's anger. One woman's refusal to accept it. The question isn't who was wrong, it's what we all learned about power. You can't teach respect from the top down. It starts on the floor and works its way up." The crowd rose in a standing ovation. Reporters called it the speech that humanized leadership. Daniel watched from the wings, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he leaned toward a colleague and said softly, "That's what a legacy sounds like." But behind the triumph, a new challenge surfaced. An investigative journalist uncovered that an older Palisade property, one not yet reformed, had mishandled a complaint of discrimination years before. It predated Tiana's leadership but bore the same brand name. Within hours, social media erupted. Did Palisade really change, or did it just rebrand? Daniel called an emergency meeting. "We can't bury this," he said. Tiana agreed. "Then we won't. We'll own it." By nightfall, she held a press conference, direct, transparent. "This company failed someone before I took this role," she said, standing before the cameras. "But the responsibility to fix it is mine. We've reached out to the former employee, apologized, and reopened the case with full transparency. Redemption doesn't expire. Neither does accountability." Her honesty disarmed critics. The next morning, even skeptical headlines called it a masterclass in ethical leadership. Daniel sent her a brief text. "You turned a scandal into strength again." She replied, "No, I just told the truth faster this time." By midsummer, the Palisade Group had expanded its outreach, creating scholarships for hospitality students, funding programs for single mothers, and opening new hotels where opportunity was the first amenity. At the grand opening of the New York property, guests filled the ballroom as Tiana took the stage beside Daniel. He introduced her not as a subordinate but as his successor in spirit. "When I met her," he said, "I saw someone cleaning a hallway. I didn't know she was about to clean my conscience." Laughter rippled through the crowd, followed by applause. Tiana shook her head, smiling. "He's still dramatic," she teased. Then she turned serious. "You all came here for luxury. But the real luxury is fairness, the kind that doesn't fade when the lights do." The applause was long and warm. Later that night, she stood on the rooftop terrace again, the same place where arguments, apologies, and promises had unfolded. Atlanta glittered below. Daniel joined her quietly. "Funny," he said. "I used to come up here to look down on the city. Now I come to remind myself I'm part of it." She smiled. "Perspective changes everything," he nodded. "You ever miss who you were before all this?" Tiana thought for a moment. "Sometimes. It was simpler when I only had to clean rooms. Now I have to clean systems," he laughed. "And you're doing both better than anyone." She turned toward him. "You ever regret what happened that day?" "Every day," he admitted. "But not because it ruined me. Because it woke me up." They stood in silence for a long moment, the night wind carrying the faint hum of the city. Weeks later, a letter arrived at Tiana's desk. It was handwritten, signed only Maya, former Palisade staff, Charlotte Branch. It read, "I watched your story. I was the girl they ignored when I reported discrimination years ago. Seeing you take that stage gave me back something I thought I'd lost my voice. Thank you for proving that one person's dignity can change thousands of minds." Tiana folded the letter carefully and placed it in her notebook beside Miss Loretta's photo. Then she looked out the window at the skyline, whispering, "This is for all of us who waited too long to be heard." That evening, she joined the staff for their weekly wrap-up meeting. No formality, no hierarchy, just shared stories over coffee. She listened more than she spoke, laughing with the bellhops, congratulating new hires, asking about families. To anyone watching, she didn't look like a CEO. She looked like one of them because she still was. Before leaving, she turned to the team. "You know why this place works?" A young clerk answered, "Because everyone matters." She smiled. "Exactly. Keep it that way." As the building quieted for the night, she walked once more through the lobby, shoes echoing softly on the marble she once scrubbed by hand. The plaque still caught the evening light. She paused to touch it, whispering the words engraved there. This space belongs to everyone. It wasn't just the hotel anymore. It was the world she'd helped rebuild, one floor, one truth, one act of courage at a time. Outside, the city lights shimmered against the glass tower, and Tiana Grant stepped into the night not as the woman who had fought for respect, but as the one who had made it permanent. A warm evening breeze swept through downtown Atlanta, carrying with it the faint hum of life. The same city that had once witnessed Tiana Grant's humiliation now whispered her name like legend. The Palisade Regency stood taller than ever, its glass walls reflecting a story that had begun with one ordinary woman and one extraordinary moment of courage. Inside the building, a charity gala was in full swing. Guests moved in elegant rhythm, laughter echoing beneath the chandeliers. But the night wasn't about luxury. It was about legacy. Daniel Park, now retired from the board, stood quietly at the edge of the ballroom, watching the scene unfold with pride and peace. When Tiana approached, wearing a navy gown instead of her familiar work uniform, he smiled. "You've turned this place into something unrecognizable," he said. She smiled back. "No, Daniel. It's finally what it should have been all along." The event's host tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we honor the woman who redefined corporate leadership, Ms. Tiana Grant." Applause erupted. Cameras flashed, but Tiana didn't bask in it. She simply took the stage with calm dignity, her hands folded in front of her. "When I first walked into this building," she began, "I was invisible. People saw a uniform, not a person. I learned that power can blind you, but humility lets you see again. What happened here didn't just change my life, it changed how we define success." She paused, scanning the audience. "Success isn't standing at the top. It's lifting others as you climb. Tonight's donations will fund scholarships for hospitality workers pursuing education, because no one should be trapped by where they start." The crowd rose to its feet. Daniel clapped hardest. After the ceremony, the two met on the rooftop terrace one last time. The skyline stretched before them, familiar, endless, alive. "So," Daniel said, "what's next for the great Ms. Grant?" She looked out at the city lights. Expansion. But not just hotels. Training centers, outreach programs, schools for service workers. "I want to turn what we built into a blueprint." He nodded. "You will." She turned to him, smiling softly. "You taught me something too, Daniel." "Oh?" he asked. "That redemption isn't about saying sorry. It's about living like you mean it." He laughed quietly. "I'll remember that." They stood side by side in companionable silence, no longer adversaries. Not quite teacher and student, just equals bound by a story neither could have written alone. A few weeks later, Tiana flew to Washington, D.C. to address a congressional hearing on workplace reform. She wasn't a politician, but her testimony carried more weight than most. "Respect," she said, "shouldn't depend on a paycheck. No policy can force empathy, but leadership can model it." When she finished, lawmakers applauded. National networks aired clips of her speech. Hashtags resurfaced. For millions of workers across the country, she wasn't just an executive, she was proof that change could begin anywhere, even on the lowest rung. Back in Atlanta, her team celebrated quietly with cake and coffee. Debbie, Tom, and Elena gathered in her office, joking about who'd play them in the inevitable movie. "You think they'll cast someone tall for me?" Tom said. Tiana grinned. "You'll probably be played by someone shorter but with better posture." They all laughed. For a moment it felt like family. Then Debbie grew thoughtful. "You know, Tiana, sometimes I still can't believe this all started because of one towel." Tiana looked at her. That towel wasn't the start. It was just the spark. The fire was already waiting. Months passed. The Palisade chain expanded globally, but its heart stayed local. Tiana spent her days mentoring young managers and her evenings writing. She was working on a book, not a memoir, but a guide titled "Cleaning the Floor, Changing the Room: Lessons in Human Leadership." One night, as she finished the final chapter, her phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "You'd be proud. The Seoul branch just opened. The plaque says your line in Korean." She smiled, typing back, "Clean till it shines." He replied, "But never let them step on your soul." She laughed softly to herself. He remembered. Years later, an old man with gray hair walked into the Palisade Regency lobby. Tourists pointed to the bronze plaque and told stories of the woman who'd once been a maid. The man smiled faintly. It was Daniel Park, visiting quietly. He saw Tiana's portrait hanging near the reception desk in her first CEO year, standing before the same marble floor where everything had changed. Beneath it, a quote was engraved. "Dignity is the one thing no job can take from you unless you give it away." He whispered, "You did it, Tiana." A young clerk noticed him and approached. "Sir, are you visiting the museum section?" Daniel chuckled. "Something like that." He looked around one last time, the place now brighter, kinder, more human than he ever managed to make it. Then he turned and walked into the city, content. In her later years, Tiana kept working quietly behind the scenes. Her company grew into a foundation that trained thousands of underprivileged workers. The Palisade name became shorthand for ethical hospitality across continents. And every year, on the anniversary of the incident, staff still placed a single folded towel on the lobby counter, perfectly aligned, perfectly clean, a silent tribute to the day the world changed course. On her final public appearance, standing before a crowd of young students, Tiana said, "I don't believe in luck. I believe in lessons. Life will test you with arrogance and reward you with humility. When someone looks down on you, remember the view from the floor shows you what needs fixing." When she stepped off stage, applause followed her like a heartbeat. Outside, Atlanta glowed golden in the sunset. Somewhere between memory and future, the city hummed with the rhythm of stories like hers, ordinary people who refused to stay silent, who proved that courage doesn't come from titles or wealth, but from standing tall when the world tells you to bow. And as the lights of the Palisade reflected off the streets below, it felt less like a monument and more like a promise. One woman's voice echoing forever through every corridor of power she'd once been told she didn't belong in.